opposite. So there's a definite move afoot here, and if Republicans are smart, they would use this ammo going forward.
Danielle, what do you think? I mean, you heard what they're saying, Armageddon. This is hardly Armageddon. This is good. This is good news for our economy. Why don't they want to recognize that?
Well, clearly part of this is political, right? Like, they have opponents in 2018, and they want to make sure that they're getting their message across. I think what the Democrats are saying is structural matters. Corporate tax cuts never expire. Individual tax cuts do. One of the things that is part of this tax plan is the repeal of the individual mandate. So you might be getting a little bit more money in your wallet, probably not this year, but next year.
No, this year you will. In fact, the Treasury Department just came out and announced that today. In fact, basically people will actually start getting more in their paychecks starting on January, next month,
which is
February.
fantastic.
So that is fantastic. I don't think the Democrats' talking points make any sense right now. And you say it's political.
Well, everything.
One, they don't make sense. But two, when it comes to economic success, that's one time you shouldn't be political. I mean, you really shouldn't. Go ahead.
Really all I'm saying is healthcare is going to be a big part of this. If the individual mandate is unwound, there's 13 million people who make it out of healthcare. Individual premiums will rise. Insurers may get out of the market. And so we may be giving with one hand and taking with the other. I agree that from a political perspective, this is going to be a hard one to fight if people are doing well. We want people to do well. But this estate tax piece and the huge break that goes to corporate America when Apple has $250 billion offshore, might bring a tenth of that back. Democrats still care about
it doesn't make any sense to me, Gary, that we have policies in place that make it most onerous to be doing business in the United States of America. You would think, given our free market capitalism principles that we were founded on, we would be the last country to be doing stuff like that. I mean, all we're trying to do here now is level the playing field so that American business can succeed and compete. What's wrong with that?
Absolutely nothing. And let me be clear. It's not just what they are saying. It's not what Elizabeth Warren's saying or Schumer, it's Pelosi. It's what they did for 8 years. They just believe in higher taxes, more rules, more regulations, more fees, more fines, more mandates, and more control by the government over our heads. They have shown it for 8 years. They're showing it now. The fact that they would use the word crumbs, the fact that they would put down something as absolutely nothing when people are benefiting not only from these bonuses, but also look what the market's doing, $7 trillion of new wealth because of this. This is not by accident. This is on purpose. And I got to tell you, I don't believe what we're seeing. It's much better than I even thought, and I was pretty much positive on it. They need to get their act together, or else, the polls are saying Republicans not so good right now. I can guarantee you the poll numbers are going to go up for Republicans as we get closer if this continues.
Look, people vote their pocketbooks. They really do. Danielle, is Nancy Pelosi running the risk of seeming increasingly like the Marie Antoinette, if you would, of politics? In other words, she doesn't relate. She doesn't get it. She hasn't had to get it because she's grown up in a very privileged way and leads a very privileged life. And yet she's out there pretending to care about average people and saying things like $1,000 is nothing but crumbs.
What she means is relative to what corporate America is gaining from this tax plan, that the average Americans who are earning $40,000 to $50,000, whether you look at it by median or by average, are not getting the same kinds of benefits. So she's been a champion of women, of the working class for decades. She's been in Congress for an extraordinary amount of time, dedicated her life. And whether you like her or not, I think the point is it's relative. It is corporate America gets an enormous amount and individuals don't get so much. And to two of Gary's points, 80% of stocks in this country are held by 20% of people, and less than 50% or around 50% of Americans actually hold stocks. So the use of the stock market, which is brilliant in many ways, certainly for institutional investors and others, it's not necessarily the best metric by which to measure how well Americans are doing.
Yeah, well, most Americans do have a 401k.
No, that includes 401k. No, sure.
If you work for a company, it's required that, automatically money goes into a 401k unless you opt out of it. So a lot of people do actually have money invested in stocks via their job. I guess the final concern here, though, is that, ultimately what we want is everybody to be on the same page when it comes to the country succeeding. And it's disappointing and disheartening, really, to see the Democrats try and downplay economic success. Unemployment, good to see you guys, way down. Stocks way up, not bad for the president's first year in office, but this is how Time Magazine sees it. We're on it. And Democrats like to say they're looking out for these dreamers by holding government funding hostage. But did Katie Pavlich just call their bluff? She's next.
January 20th, Cavuto is live for 2 hours from the nation's capital. 1 year after the inauguration, Neil breaks down the president's accomplishments, agenda, and how it all impacts you. Starting January 20th, don't miss Cavuto live every Saturday on the Fox News Channel.
Bill is a DACA solution. The Goodlatte bill brings peace of mind to the DACA kids, and it also shows here's what the security piece looks like. So that is constructive. The Goodlatte bill doesn't say don't help DACA kids, deport. It doesn't do that. It says here's one way to solve this problem.
This is sort of like a little dance. Okay, Mr. Chairman, thanks for your bill. I really like it. It has no prospect for success. Zero.
House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi calling a bill that provides protection for dreamers and our borders a non-starter. And now Katie Pavlich is here, and she's calling her and other Democrats bluff. She says they're using these young people as political pawns. Katie, welcome.
Good to see you.
Wow.
Glad you survived Mount Washington in the cold weather. We're glad to see you back and thawed out.
That was the coldest place on Earth,
yes,
if
indeed.
you can imagine.
Yeah.
And I'm told it was actually 20 degrees warmer on the planet of Mars.
Oh,
so,
man.
hey, I know how to pick them when it comes to vacation spots. But walk us through why you think that they're using young people in this very political way.
Democrats are always accusing Republicans of not just being bad on policy, but of being bad people. If you're not for DACA or comprehensive immigration reform, you're a bad person who doesn't have any empathy for people who were brought here illegally by their parents. Now, if you look at what has been proposed by the White House and by Republicans in the legislation that was introduced yesterday, it's what the White House has wanted. A deal on DACA, which Democrats have claimed for a long time that they wanted. It's why Barack Obama did it through an executive fiat, even though he said he couldn't do it that way. He did it anyway, claiming it was for the good of the people. There's chain migration ending, diversity lottery program ending, and of course the wall. The three pillars of that outside of DACA, Democrats have already voted for. Democrats in the Gang of Eight bill the Gang of Eight bill, bipartisan group of lawmakers, Republicans and Democrats, included an elimination of chain immigration and the visa lottery program. And if you go all the way back to 2006 for the Secure Fence Act, which Chuck Schumer voted for, it was just a kind of a watered down version of a wall. It's a fence, a wall, same thing. What Trump is asking for now, and yet Democrats are opposed because they want to continue to use the DACA issue against Republicans as a political hammer going into 2018.
So it's a wedge issue for them. So
Absolutely.
What ultimately happens then? Does anything get done, or do you think that they're going to just dig their heels in because they don't want to see him succeed on anything?
We're seeing a little bit of movement on Capitol Hill now of Democrats maybe thinking that this is not the best stand for them to take on DACA. It's a bipartisan issue that the majority of the country, both left and right, believe should be handled in a way that allows them to stay. But the big fight, Trish, that nobody's actually talking about is the comprehensive part of this that comes afterwards, because parents of DACA recipients, they're here illegally too. And the question is, do they get to stay? What are the protections? Some of the details of the Senate bill that's coming out tonight or tomorrow show that DACA recipients' parents will not get permanent status, but they will again get protected temporary status, which opens up the question again of where does this thing end?
Well, and what does it mean for Donald Trump's base? I mean, they don't like the idea of providing any form of amnesty to people who came here illegally in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we're skeptical of some of the polling, but according to some of the polling, his base actually is in favor of approving DACA. What they're not in favor of is approving it without any kind of border security in return, meaning the wall that Donald Trump so famously campaigned on. Now, the president has, throughout the last 24 hours, made it crystal clear that he's not going to sign anything that doesn't include the wall. But during that bipartisan meeting, it wasn't so clear, because he said, whatever you guys come up with, Democrats, Republicans, I will sign. And then he had to kind of walk it back and remind everybody that the wall is going to be part of that legislation.
It makes you wonder, is what he's doing right now sort of for public posturing, whereas when we saw him in the room running that meeting, that's how the sausage gets made, and maybe there's more negotiating that comes into play than we see, right, when he's on the public stage.
Well, calling the Democrats bluff on this DACA issue and shutting them down when they say that they only want a, quote, clean DACA bill, which means voting through DACA without any border security, is really them just setting up the country for a problem in the future of having illegal immigration. Because if you don't stop the problem now, it's just going to reoccur again, and Democrats see those people as future voters.
So there is the
Indeed.
Political pond.
There it is.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
soon.
Happy 2018.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Should certain Medicaid recipients be required to work? For the first time, the White House is allowing states a pathway to make it work. Maine is one of them. Republican Governor Paul LePage is here. And remember when Time predicted a Trump meltdown before Election Day? Well, we know that didn't happen. So is it any wonder that this is how they're depicting him now? We're on it. The Trump administration has cleared the way for states to impose work requirements for those on Medicaid. Fox Business Network's Blake Berman is at the White House with more on this story. Hi, Blake.
Hi there, Trish, and this is now up to 11 states who have expressed interest, with South Carolina being the very latest. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services making this announcement earlier today, essentially allowing states to test what amounts to a work requirement. Two conditions for if you want to receive Medicaid in those states should they opt in. First, you need to work, or second, you need to be involved in what is described as a community engagement activity. Falling underneath that umbrella is the following: whether you're in skills training, possibly if you're in school, partaking in a job search, caring for someone else, or volunteering. CMS does say there would be exemptions, including for the disabled, the elderly, children, and pregnant women. In a tweet today, the CMS director, Seema Verma, defended the policy by writing, quote, "We need to support states and give them more freedom to design innovative programs that get positive results for Medicaid beneficiary." However, critics say this goes way too far. I asked the White House press secretary Sarah Sanders earlier today about one of those criticisms. Critics would say you need to be healthy to get a job in the first place. How are they wrong?
Look, certainly we want the American workforce to be healthy, and we're focused on helping improve healthcare across the board, but we also want people to have jobs. We're working on both of those things simultaneously. I don't see how that conflates with one another.
Trish, roughly 70 million Americans, that is 1 in 5 Americans just about, are dependent or at least receive Medicaid. Legal challenges, no doubt about this one, Trish, are sure to follow.
Indeed. All right. Thank you so much, Blake Berman. Well, 11 states are seeking work requirements for Medicaid recipients, including Maine. Is this the right move? Well, let's ask. Maine Governor Paul LePage. Governor, good to see you. Welcome.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking to have me on. And I will tell you, is it a good thing? It is. We have done it with TANF in Maine, and it's been a resounding success. And what it really does, and what the opponents should look at, is it takes away isolation, it creates new relationships, it improves the quality of life, it helps the labor force, and most of all, it transitions them to a path to go towards commercial insurance and other forms of employer-sponsored insurance. So it is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Let me ask you about sort of, more specific situations. You saw that some people could get an exemption. Blake Berman, our reporter, put a list of examples up, and one of the examples was if you were caring for someone. So would that include, say, a single mother who maybe has 4 little ones, all under the age of 5, that, she can't get out to a job for because she would have to find someone to care for her children? Would that be included, for example, in Maine?
Yes, it would be. In matter of fact,
so she'd be okay.
That is one of the classes of... Yeah, that's the class we want to protect. I strongly believe that a very strong safety net for our children, our elderly, our disabled is very, very important. And those with intellectual disabilities also have to be protected. So I am a firm believer that those people need to be protected.
So if you're protecting those that need protected, I mean, that's good. Why is there such an anger about this out there, in your view, Governor?
I have no idea. In my view, it used to be when I was growing up, you worked hard, keep your nose clean, and you're successful, and you'd be a success, and everybody would look up to you. The new society we live in, they want you to be dependent on government, and if you're dependent enough on government, you will vote for those who support you. And it really doesn't work that way, and we're proving it in Maine that we are changing, reforming our welfare, and we're gaining appreciation by our populace.
Well, the goal should be to make everyone as self-sufficient as they can possibly be, right, Governor? I mean, that's our government should be helping to make them independent.
Absolutely.
And if you create a system, sorry, go ahead. We've got a little bit of a delay that I think is affecting
I believe
us.
Financial independence is so important for all families, and all families love it. And I can recite you stories and of actual things that have happened in the state of Maine where back in 2011, I was very unpopular for trying to put people to work. Now I'm getting letters saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. We are now independent. We are doing well. I have a nurse who's an RN now who is just ecstatic. Never thought she could get there on her own. A little nudge, and now she's so proud of herself.
Oh, that's great. It's going to make you feel really good. Because that's, you know, look, if you can enable people and help them to help themselves, then you've really achieved something. I think that is very commendable indeed, sir. In terms of what's happening nationally, there's been a lot of talk of entitlement reform, you know, cutting back on some of the federal welfare programs. Given what you've seen succeed in Maine, and I know Maine very well, I'm from New Hampshire and have spent a lot of time in your state, sir. But you know, Maine's a small place, well, large territorial wise, but it's got a small enough population. Do you think, though, what you have done in Maine could succeed on a national level?
Absolutely believe it can, and I think it will. I think it's just a matter of transitioning from one culture to another, to a culture that's not too far in the past, and it really worked very well. It made us who we are today. So it's not reinventing the wheel. We're just going back to the basics, just like education. You know, you got to learn to read, write, and do math, and that's really the basics. And having self-respect for yourself. And being financially independent and having the courage and to go out and do things on your own is really the American way.
Governor, it is good to see you. I'm all for what you're doing. I think the value of hard work is something that we do need to keep teaching. Good to see you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
We'll be right back.
Needles.
Walmart announcing cash bonuses and wage hikes today. Just another example of American workers benefiting from corporate tax cuts almost instantly. But has this changed the Democrats' view of tax cuts? We're asking Democratic Congressman from California, Brad Sherman. Good to see you, sir.
Trish, thanks for having me on to talk about this deficit exploding, job or outsourcing economic disaster for our country. You're being fair and balanced. When Tucker had me on to talk about nonsense, he promised that he would have me on once the tax bill was published, but he's been a coward every single time because he knows he cannot defend this tax bill.
Yeah, that's not fair. Hey, come on now. That's not fair. And you know what? You're here on this show right now with me, and we're going to talk about all this because you think it's going to be painful for the deficit, et cetera. It's funny how these talking points have kind of reversed, right? Because I seem to recall that was a conservative talking point. But have at it, sir. What is your biggest concern right now, especially when you look at Dow 25,000, GDP growth better than 3%, unemployment at record lows, and wages now increasing thanks to hundreds of companies giving out wage increases?
There are some small wage increases. In some extent, these wage increases are just to match minimum wage statutes that have been passed in Democratic states. Walmart says they're raising to $11 an hour. We require that in California, and then they can say, well, it's because we love the Republicans. No, it's because California requires it. If you look at tax
Walmart's
policies,
actually given out bonuses to the tune of $1,000, right? Something that Nancy Pelosi calls just crumbs.
Well,
but
if you look at the economy
money,
at the whole, with well over 100 million employees, the fact that a few companies are giving a few bonuses doesn't disguise the fact that when we have Democratic tax policies in force, we have much higher economic growth rates than we have when we have Republican economic policies and tax policies in force.
Really? I mean, because, you know, the last, 8 years under President Obama, that didn't turn out so well. You had average growth of 1.5%. It should have been a whole lot better, but we had no economic policy out of the Obama administration.
Trish, you've got to look at what tax law is in force, not who's sitting in the White House. It took several years for Obama to change his tax policies. We've had Democratic tax policies with almost 2 2/3% economic growth. Compare that to the low economic growth we had under George W. Bush's tax policies. Look at Reagan's and look at Clinton's economic when their tax law
Clinton
was in force
benefited from
and
the
signed
tech
into
boom.
law.
You know that,
What?
Congressman. Clinton benefited from the tech boom. There was an actual structural shift in our economy at that point in time. And you know what? He wasn't able to sustain it.
We had structural shifts in our economy at all times, and Clinton promoted that tech boom.
Congressman,
but the fact
I guess I'm
remains,
just troubled by...
You can look at all
No. You know what? Go read an Economics 101 textbook. You can actually chart this stuff out. When you put more money in the hands of people and more money in the hands of corporations, the people and the corporations that are actually earning it in the first place, that equals
the last
growth.
30 years of history proves you wrong. When we had Republican tax policies in force, we had lower
Look at what
economic
happened
growth.
with President Reagan.
Because you run that huge deficit, you think you're putting more money in the hands of people, but then the federal government goes into the capital pool and takes the money out. We're going to be borrowing $1.7 trillion. That's taking money out of the economy, out of where it's available for factory expansion.
Where are you going to get the growth? Where are you going to get the economic growth, sir?
We had higher economic growth in 2016 in terms of jobs than 2017. But after we passed Obamacare, after we passed Dodd-Frank, we suddenly had 2 million or more, almost 3 million in one case, new jobs every year. Now that's tailed off a little bit with Trump, and it'll tail off more.
This from someone who's fiscally conservative, as you just suggested. You're so concerned about the deficit, yet you want more entitlement programs. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
I'm not here to. Did I say I was for more entitlement programs? I'm here to preserve Medicare and Social Security.
You want more Obamacare? I mean, you're telling me that Obamacare was good for the economy.
Obamacare correlated with a great increase in the number of jobs created each year. We were told it was a job killer, but we had far more jobs created each year after it was adopted than before.
I think those numbers, sir, can be disputed. I guess I just want to go back to what's happening right now. What's happening right now in our economy.
You can have alternative facts if you want, but if you look at the official statistics of this country, you will. What? Let's go through the list.
Here and now, okay? Here and now.
Here and now, we created only 2 million jobs last year. We created 2.25 million jobs the year before. After we adopted Obamacare and Dodd-Frank, we created over 2 million jobs the year before, only 1 million jobs. Those are the real facts, not the alternative facts.
The news today. The news that Walmart is giving out bonuses.
The news today is that Walmart is closing 63 Sam's Clubs, and they didn't put that in their press release.
Well,
you don't want to talk about the 63 Sam's Clubs and the thousands of people losing their jobs.
Businesses close all the time because you're not going to keep a store open in a community.
That's why we have a Christmas and a New Year's.
It is not prosperous to keep it open.
That's
I guess I'm just amazed by how you guys
are given all the
time.
Close opens all the time. Close all the time. You can't attribute it to a tax bill.
It's almost as though I fear some members of your party do not want to see this economy succeed, because if this economy succeeds, people will credit Donald Trump with that.
We
And you don't
want
want
it to
that
succeed.
happening.
That's why we're there, fighting to preserve Social Security and Medicare. That's why we're there, trying to make sure that we don't deport
Nobody's taking away
millions and
Social
millions
Security.
of people. That's why we're there, not wanting the federal government to close down and the economic problems that would have. We're working to improve the economy every day. And if the America succeeds, everybody succeeds. But you look at this tax bill, here's what it does for factories. You can have a 0% tax on the profits of your factory only if you move it overseas. That's the offshoring provision of this bill. Not only does it provide 85% of its benefits to the top 1%, it provides a 100% tax break for those who move their factories overseas. Those are the facts. You can make up alternative facts if you want.
There's $2.7 trillion sitting overseas, possibly more. There is now an opportunity to bring all that money back onshore
Right.
so that it's working for us.
And we could have done that with
need
democratic
policies, sir, that make
policies
us
as well.
competitive. Competitive because it is a competitive world out there, and America should lead the way on this. You know that.
We are competitive because we have the best workers and the best entrepreneurs. We do now. We're competing for
But you
who
want to
can
stifle
give
that
the most money
entrepreneurism.
to
You
the
want
top
to
1%.
stifle that work ethic by taxing people more and more and more to, cover
This
your
bill
concerns about your
raises
sudden concerns and recent concerns about debt. Unfortunately, I am out of time. I got a hard commercial break
I've
coming
been
on.
fighting for a balanced budget for a lot of years.
Representative,
I was
it's
part